At Sunday's family barbecue, my son picked up the steak I just plated and threw it straight into the dirt. Everyone fell silent. "You want meat, Mom? Crawl for it," he said, laughing. The laughter wasn't just his. My daughter-in-law chuckled behind her sunglasses, swirling a glass of Chardonnay as if I were nothing but the punchline of a good joke. My son turned back to the grill, flipping another slab of meat like nothing had happened. I didn't say a word. I just stood there, my paper plate now empty, my knees locked, my face calm. A few relatives glanced my way, their expressions a mix of discomfort and awkward sympathy. No one said anything. I walked back to the folding chair they'd set up for me, farthest from the patio, closest to the trash bins. The sun had shifted, and there was no shade left on that side of the yard. The steak, still sizzling minutes ago, now sat face down in a patch of dry grass, picking up dust and ants. I kept smiling, but inside, something cracked. Earlier that morning, I had brought over a fresh bowl of my homemade potato salad, Joey's favorite. I had marinated the meat overnight when I heard he was hosting. It used to be our tradition, when his father was alive. A family grill, me prepping, his dad manning the fire, Joey by our side, learning how to season, when to flip. Now, the grill was his domain. I wasn't allowed to step near it. "Just sit, Mom," he had said sharply, when I'd offered to help set up. So I sat. I watched him burn the ribs, too much heat. Lid closed too long, and still accept praise from his wife's friends. I noticed how no one touched the salad I brought. Pamela had made her quinoa kale version, and that was what everyone raved about. When I tried to speak to my grandson, he shrugged and said, "I'm kinda busy," before walking off with his tablet. I told myself not to take it personally. Not today. The incident with the steak happened about 2 hours in. It was subtle at first, just a joke, they thought. I had stood up and quietly asked if I could have a piece of the sirloin, the one I brought myself. He looked at me, smirked, and hurled it to the ground. "It's yours," he said, "go get it." Someone gasped, but no one moved. I picked up my glass of iced tea, walked slowly to my chair, and sat back down. My hands didn't shake, though I expected them to. My heart didn't race. Even as the humiliation settled like ash across my shoulders, I felt only one thing: clarity. Clarity about where I stood in this new version of my family. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far it reaches. Because sometimes, what breaks you open is not a scream or a slap, but a piece of steak, tossed into the dirt by the son you raised. I sat there quietly, the sun crawling up my ankles, its heat mingling with the sting of what had just happened. My chair, low, wobbly, stained, had been placed at the very edge of the backyard, near the recycling bins. From where I sat, I could hear the buzzing of flies and the sharp clink of someone tossing a beer can into the bin behind me. I looked down at my plate. Empty, not even a scrap of salad. They hadn't even given me a proper seat at the main table. That was reserved for Pamela's parents and their church friends. They sat comfortably under the canopy, sipping wine, shaded from the heat. Laughter floated from that side of the yard, light and careless. No one looked my way. I reached for my glass of tea, but the ice had melted. The condensation had soaked the flimsy paper napkin beneath it. It felt like such a small thing, but it was those small things that stuck. They always did. I used to think maybe I was imagining it. The way they never asked if I needed help getting up the steps. The way Pamela called me, Granny, in that clipped tone, just loud enough for others to hear. Like a reminder of my place. The way my son had started referring to his childhood house as ours. Never Mom's place. But today, that illusion dissolved completely. No more wondering, no more hoping. I saw it in Joey's eyes when he laughed at me. It wasn't just a joke. It was dismissal, disdain, and the worst part wasn't the meat or the dirt or the laughter. It was how normal it all felt to them. From my corner, I could see the grill smoke curling into the sky, the heat shimmering above the coals. I watched Pamela walk up and slip a second burger onto her father's plate. He didn't need it, he was already full, but she smiled at him sweetly, dotingly, like a daughter should. I used to get that smile. Once. It hit me then, what I'd been avoiding for years. Somewhere along the way, I had stopped being someone they loved. and started being someone they tolerated. Like old wallpaper. Familiar, but outdated. Something they didn't have the heart to tear down, yet. I heard the kids playing tag near the pool. My grandson ran past me, nearly tripping over my feet. He didn't even look down, just kept running. I pressed my palms into my lap, steadying them. I'd been shaking, not with anger, but with something colder. Resolve, maybe, or resignation. It's hard to tell the difference. Sometimes. A paper plate flew off a nearby table and landed near my feet. I bent slowly to pick it up. That's when I heard Pamela whisper. "She's still sitting there? I thought she'd left by now." No one answered her. No one had to. I didn't leave. I stayed until the sun dipped behind the neighbor's fence and the kids started begging for dessert. Because sometimes, the most dignified thing you can do is simply stay seated, quiet, steady, and entirely awake to the truth of where you are. And who you're no longer pretending to be. As the sun faded, the party began to break apart. The goodbyes started quietly, little waves across the yard, clinks of wine glasses, car doors opening and closing. I watched it all from my chair. Still unmoved, still beside the bins. No one offered to walk me to my car. No one asked if I needed help gathering my things. Maybe they assumed someone else would. Or maybe, they just didn't care. Pamela started stacking leftover burgers into plastic containers. Joey carried folding chairs one by one to the garage. The same arms that used to wrap around me when he scraped his knees now lifted furniture as if I didn't exist on the edge of the yard. I waited. I let them clean, let them sweep around me. When the string lights flickered off and the patio music died, I stood. I made my way slowly to the kitchen, thinking maybe I could wash my own plate. It was something, small, quiet, but it made me feel human again. The sink was already full. I placed my dish on the counter and turned to leave. That's when I saw it. Pamela's mother, Carol, pulling out a Tupperware filled with the potato salad I had brought. She scooped it into the trash without even removing the lid. I told her no one eats mayo in this house anymore. She whispered, laughing. Pamela nodded. I only kept it out so she wouldn't feel bad. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. Just turned around and left the kitchen. On the walk back to my car, the backyard looked different. Not the same warm space where Joey used to chase fireflies or learn to ride his bike. The wooden fence was peeling now. The grass had browned under the grill. The laughter I used to hear there, mine, my husband's, was long gone. I reached the driver's door and paused. My reflection in the window startled me. The same soft blouse I'd ironed that morning. The same silver chain my husband gave me the year we turned 30. I still wore it, even though he was gone. Even though none of them noticed. I sat in the driver's seat but didn't start the engine. There's a moment that happens when silence is heavier than noise, when the quiet isn't peaceful but weighted. Pressing against your chest like a truth you've refused to name. That was what I felt as I sat in the dark car, watching the porch lights glow behind me. A thought came gently, almost kindly. This was the last family barbecue I would attend. And not because they told me not to come, but because I had finally heard what they'd been saying all along, through actions, through silence, through laughter over a stake in the dirt. You are no longer part of us. And I was done pretending otherwise. So I drove away slowly, windows down, the summer air brushing against my face. I didn't cry. I didn't curse. I just let go. Not of the memory, not of the past, but of the need to belong where I clearly didn't. I didn't drive straight home. Instead, I found myself turning toward a familiar street, one I hadn't visited in years. The road was narrower than I remembered, the trees taller. I passed the corner store where Joey used to beg for candy. Drove by the old church where his father and I renewed our vows on our 25th anniversary. I kept driving until I reached the lake. It was quiet there, always had been. The water still caught the light in soft ripples. The dock creaked the same way it used to. I parked and stepped out slowly, my shoes crunching against the gravel. No one else was around. Just the sound of summer insects and the steady breath of the breeze through the reeds. I sat on the same bench where I once nursed Joey when he was a baby. He had colic, and the only thing that soothed him was the sound of water. I used to hum to him here, rocking him under the sky, thinking the world would always stay small and gentle. I smiled at the memory, then let it go. That night, I stayed at a motel nearby. Clean, quiet, one lamp on the nightstand. The kind of place where no one expects you to smile or explain why you're alone. I pulled off my blouse and folded it carefully. Set the silver chain beside the lamp. Lay down and stared at the ceiling. For once, my mind didn't race. I just kept seeing his face, Joey's, when he laughed at me. I replayed it, not to punish myself, but to finally look at it clearly. Not as his mother, not as someone desperate to be loved, but as a woman who had been treated with public cruelty and called it, just a joke, for far too long. And in that silence, I made a promise to myself. No more excuses. The next morning, I sat with a cup of motel coffee and a pen. I wrote Joey a letter. Not long, not dramatic, just honest. I told him how I had loved every year of raising him, even the hard ones. That I had forgiven many things. Quietly, because I wanted to keep the family whole. That I had excused the distance, the coldness, the small humiliations. But not this. I ended the letter with one sentence. I won't fight to stay in a place where I'm not wanted. Joey, but I will never forget who you were before you forgot who I was. I folded the note and placed it in an envelope. I didn't mail it, not yet. Some words need time to settle before they arrive. Driving home, the house looked the same as when I left. Still, something in me had shifted. I walked inside. It smelled faintly of lavender detergent and old wood. My husband's photo still sat on the mantel, his smile warm and unaware. I touched the frame gently. I think you'd be disappointed, I whispered. But then I corrected myself. No, you'd be furious. Because the man I married would never have let anyone speak to me that way. And certainly not our son. He would have stood up, said something, drawn a line. I'd spent years hoping Joey had inherited his father's heart. Turns out, he just inherited his silence. But I won't be silent anymore. I left the letter on my mantel. Not addressed, not sealed, just resting beside my husband's photo. Beneath the soft layer of dust I hadn't wiped in weeks. I didn't want to send it. Not yet. Because it wasn't about him reading it. It was about me writing it. I needed to see the truth in my own handwriting. Needed to let the ink dry on a version of me that no longer begged to be included. That week, I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened the drawer in the hallway cabinet. The one I always avoided. Inside were the old documents, property papers, bank records, our will. My husband's careful handwriting filled the margins of every page, notes. Reminders, arrows drawn beside things he wanted us to update but never got around to. I sat on the floor and read through them slowly. My knees aching but my hands steady. There it was. The joint ownership document for the house. My name first, then his. No mention of Joey, no mention of anyone else. I felt something shift again. This time, not emotionally, legally. The next day, I called Mr. Edwards, our old attorney. He hadn't heard from me in over a decade, but he remembered my voice right away. Still sharp as ever, he said with a smile I could hear through the phone. I asked if we could meet. We sat across from each other at his office, surrounded by oak furniture and framed diplomas. I laid out the documents one by one, told him about the barbecue, told him about the steak, about the words, about the years leading up to that moment. He didn't interrupt, he just listened. And when I finished, he asked a simple question. What would you like to do? I didn't want revenge. I didn't want headlines or drama or shouting matches. I just wanted clarity. So I asked him to update my will. I asked him to prepare a deed transfer, one that ensured my home would go to someone who never laughed when I was in pain. Someone who didn't look at me like an obligation. My granddaughter. She's only 11, but she's kind. And more importantly, she sees me. She notices when my hands shake pouring tea. She asks about grandpa and listens when I answer. She hugs me just because. I want her to know that love leaves footprints. Even when the house is quiet. Even when everyone else forgets you. When I left the attorney's office, I felt taller. Not younger, not freer. Just whole. Like I'd stitched something back together inside me. Something I didn't even realize had been torn. I stopped by the market on the way home. Bought peaches. Heavy. Ripe ones like the kind my husband used to slice and sprinkle with cinnamon. Back at the house, I peeled one and ate it slowly by the kitchen window. No phone, no noise, no one interrupting me. Just the sweetness. And the silence. And the certainty that I had finally come home, to myself. 3 days later, my doorbell rang just after sunset. I wasn't expecting anyone. I had just finished folding the laundry, simple things, soft towels. The cardigan I wear when it gets chilly around the neck. The sky outside was fading. That dusky blue slipping into orange. I wiped my hands on the edge of my apron and walked slowly to the door. It was her, my granddaughter. No parents, just her. She stood there holding a grocery bag and a nervous smile. "Hi, Grandma," she said, barely above a whisper. I let her in, and the silence between us wasn't awkward. It was gentle. She took off her shoes without being asked and walked straight to the kitchen like she used to when she was smaller. Back when she'd visit on Saturdays and color at the counter while I made muffins. She pulled out the bag's contents, a box of tea, 2 apples, and a pack of those oatmeal cookies she knows I like. "I told Mom I needed to drop off school papers," she said, "but I just wanted to see you." We sat in the kitchen, sipping the weak tea I always make too early. I offered her half a cookie. She took it, then looked at me for a long time, longer than most adults ever do. And then she said it. "Why did Daddy do that at the barbecue?" I didn't flinch. I didn't pretend I didn't know what she meant. Instead, I set down my mug and asked, "Did it scare you?" She nodded. "Did it make you feel confused?" I added. Another nod. I didn't speak badly about her father. I never would. But I told her something I wish someone had told me when I was her age. Sometimes, people forget how to be kind to the ones who raised them. And that says more about their heart than yours. She was quiet for a moment, then said, "You didn't deserve it." And in that moment, I saw something in her, something familiar. Not just love, but recognition. She saw me, not just as Grandma, but as a person who had been hurt. That was enough. Before she left, she handed me a small envelope. "Open it later," she said, and gave me a quick hug before running down the porch steps. After she left, I stood by the window for a while, just watching the streetlights come on. Then I opened the envelope. Inside was a folded sheet of notebook paper, her handwriting neat and full of loops. It read, "Dear Grandma, one day, when I'm older, I want to take care of you like you always took care of me. Love, Lila." I pressed the letter to my chest and felt something I hadn't in a long time. Not sadness. Not regret. But hope. The kind that arrives quietly. Like dusk. Like forgiveness. Like a granddaughter at your door with tea and cookies, choosing to see you. Even when others don't. A week passed, then 2. No calls, no texts. Not from Joey, not from Pamela, not even a forwarded photo from the barbecue. The silence wasn't accidental, it was a message. But I didn't chase it. I had nothing left to explain. Instead, I watered the garden, reorganized the linen closet, read through my husband's old notebooks, pages full of quotes, grocery lists, and reminders to love her more on hard days. Then one morning, while flipping through the local paper, I saw it. A baby shower announcement. Pamela's sister. Hosted at my son's house. There it was in bold. Hosted by Pamela and Joey Thompson at their home. No mention of me. No, beloved mother of the host. No invitation tucked beneath my door. No polite text pretending it was just an oversight. It wasn't. It was deliberate. And strangely, I wasn't hurt. Because this time, I saw it for what it was, not a personal failure. But a pattern, one I'd ignored for far too long. Later that day, I stopped by the post office to mail a package for Lila, her favorite strawberry-scented erasers and a new sketchpad. The clerk smiled and asked if I wanted to add a note. I said yes. I wrote, "You reminded me that being seen is better than being invited." When I got home, I made tea and sat by the window again. Same place, same view, but this time, with a pad of paper on my lap and a pen that didn't shake. I began to write out all the things I had given to my family over the years. Not just money or meals, but memories. Late-night drives during thunderstorms. Homemade costumes sewn the night before school plays. The time I stayed up 3 days straight when Joey had chickenpox. It filled 3 pages before I stopped. Then I flipped to a new page and wrote one simple question. What have they given back? The answer didn't need to be long. It didn't even need to be written. I already knew. That night, I pulled out the folder from Mr. Edwards. The house transfer papers. The updated will. Still unsigned. Still waiting. I looked at the blank signature line and thought about all the women like me, mothers, widows, caregivers, who quietly disappear into the background of their own lives. How many of us are erased politely? With party invites that never come. With thank yous that never arrive. With children who remember our lessons but forget our faces. I picked up the pen. And I signed. Not because I was angry. But because I was done waiting to be asked if I still mattered. Across the room, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Pamela. Just a heads up, if you hear about the baby shower. It's really more for her side of the family. Small gathering, hope you understand. No greeting, no apology, no invitation. I didn't reply. I simply turned off the phone and slid the signed papers back into the folder. Because I understood perfectly. And that was the last message I ever needed. It was around 3 a.m. when I woke up from a dream. Not a nightmare. Not a memory either. Just an image, Joey, maybe 8 years old, sitting on the kitchen floor, eating cereal straight from the box and grinning up at me like I was the whole world. For a moment, I could almost hear the crunch. See the milk ring around his mouth. Feel the warmth in the room before it all went quiet. I sat up, swung my legs off the bed, and reached for the lamp. Instead, my hand touched the edge of a worn photo album. I hadn't opened it in years. Page after page, there he was. Joey in his Halloween costume, a crooked little pirate with a plastic sword and one missing shoe. Joey at his high school graduation, arms stiff at his side, too proud to smile but blinking back tears when he hugged his dad. Joey holding baby Lila in the hospital room, nervous and awestruck. He had once been gentle. Once been mine. I traced the edges of the photos with my fingers and whispered. You used to know how to love. It's a strange ache, mourning someone who's still alive. But that's what I was doing. In the soft light of my bedroom. Alone with fading pictures and questions that would never be answered. When did the shift begin? Was it after his father passed? When Pamela moved in? When their lives got louder and I got quieter? Maybe there wasn't one moment. Maybe it was erosion, slow and silent, like waves wearing down stone. I remembered something my husband once said to me, years ago. After a Sunday lunch when Joey had snapped at me for correcting his grammar. He loves you, he had said, but he's starting to take you for granted. Don't let that become his habit. I had laughed it off then. It's just a phase, I'd told him. He'll grow out of it. But maybe he didn't. Maybe he grew into it. And maybe I let him. Because that's what mothers do, isn't it? We forgive. We excuse. We cover up the bruises with holiday cards and casserole dishes. We say, he's just tired, or, she's under a lot of pressure, or, they don't mean it. Until one day, we find ourselves watching from the edge of the yard while our steak hits the dirt. I closed the album and sat there a while longer. Not crying. Not even sad. Just clear. I wasn't angry with Joey anymore. I was disappointed, for both of us. Because the boy in those photos? He could have grown into a man who protected his mother's dignity. Who taught his daughter to do the same. Who hosted family gatherings where love wasn't conditional. But he didn't. And now, he'll never inherit this home, not because I'm punishing him. But because I refuse to reward erasure. He forgot me while I was still here. And that, more than anything, is what broke the bond. Not the barbecue. Not the letter. Not even the silence. Just the slow, steady forgetting of the woman who once gave him everything. And now? I'm finally giving something back, to myself. The next Sunday, I set the table for one. Not because I was lonely. But because I finally understood something most people don't learn until too late. There's a difference between being alone and being discarded. One you choose. The other chooses you. I had spent years pretending not to notice which one I was living in. The table was small, round, covered with a linen cloth I hadn't used since my anniversary dinner 6 years ago. I lit a candle, not because anyone was watching, but because it made the soup taste better. I played Billie Holiday on the old speaker. Let the music float around the kitchen like steam from the pot. And when I sat down, I didn't scroll my phone. Didn't check for texts. Didn't wonder if Joey would call. He didn't. He wouldn't. And that silence no longer stung. It just clarified things. Halfway through the meal, I looked out the window and saw Lila's bike parked at the curb. My heart skipped, but I waited. Let her come at her own pace. She knocked gently, then poked her head in before I could answer. I brought the book we talked about, she said, holding up a dog-eared copy of Anne of Green Gables. I smiled. Chapter 4? Already read it. Twice. She grinned. We didn't talk about her father. Not that day. Instead, we sat on the couch and read aloud. She rested her head on my shoulder somewhere around chapter 6. And for the first time in weeks, I let myself hope out loud. Maybe next weekend, I said softly. We'll bake something. What do you think? She nodded without lifting her head. Can we make it from scratch this time? After she left, I cleaned up the soup bowls and blew out the candle. And that's when it hit me. The shift wasn't just in them. It had been in me, too. I used to chase inclusion like it was oxygen. Used to soften my voice, make myself small, show up with a smile even when my chest was cracked open. But not anymore. Now, I showed up for myself. Even if it meant setting a table for one. Because I'd rather eat alone with dignity than be fed scraps with a smile. It was 2 weeks after the baby shower. I had just come in from watering the hydrangeas when the phone rang. I almost didn't answer. But something told me to pick up. It was Joey. His voice was tight, like someone trying to act normal through gritted teeth. "Hi, Mom," he said. No warmth, no pause. Just those 2 words, like an obligation. I waited. He said he heard from Pamela that Lila had been spending a lot of time over there. Like, there was some dangerous territory. Someplace he hadn't authorized. He didn't ask if I was okay. Didn't mention the barbecue. Didn't even pretend to be checking in. It was about control. Reigning in the parts of his life that had drifted out of reach. I just think we should be on the same page, he continued. I could almost hear Pamela in the background, whispering strategy. We don't want her getting confused about family roles, he said. That word, roles, hung in the air like smoke. As if I were playing a character instead of being who I've always been. His mother. His daughter's grandmother. A woman with a name. A home. A history. Not a piece on a board they could reposition. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't interrupt. When he finished, I took a slow breath and said, "She's not confused. She's observant." There was a pause. Then I added, "And I don't need to be managed. Joey, I'm not a PR problem. I'm a person." He tried to backtrack, to spin it soft. "You know what I mean. Mom, we just want consistency. Boundaries. Boundaries." After everything, I could have reminded him of all the times I dropped everything to show up for him. All the nights I stayed awake so he could sleep. All the years I bent myself into someone easier to handle, less loud. Less honest, less present. But I didn't. I just said, "I've already set my boundary. And she's sitting in my living room reading Anne of Green Gables." He didn't like that. You can always tell when someone expected submission and got clarity instead. His voice turned sharp. "Well, maybe we need to talk about visitation. What's appropriate?" I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. "You're welcome to talk about that," I said, "when you remember how to talk to me." Then I hung up. I didn't cry. Didn't collapse. I made a cup of chamomile. I folded a blanket. I opened the window and let the evening air in. Because peace doesn't always arrive with soft music and candles. Sometimes, it shows up in the exact moment you choose not to explain your worth. To someone who forgot it on purpose. 2 days after the call, I met with Mr. Edwards again. This time, it wasn't just about signatures or paperwork. It was about intent. Because clarity, once earned, demands action. I wanted everything documented, clean, final, unmistakable. We sat at the same oak desk. Same lamp, same calm patience in his eyes. I want to put the house in a trust, I told him, now, while I'm of sound mind, while there's no question about my reasons. He nodded slowly. And I wanted to go to my granddaughter, Lila, upon my passing. No contests, no loopholes, no clauses that can be twisted later. He scribbled notes, adjusted his glasses. I've seen this before, he said gently, mothers reaching their threshold. I smiled, not sad, not bitter. Thresholds are useful, I replied. They show you when it's time to stop waiting for change and start creating it. We spent the afternoon reviewing every line. The trust, the will, the medical directives. I didn't rush. Didn't flinch. Didn't hesitate. Because something shifts in you when you stop begging for a seat at the table and decide to build your own instead. That evening, I lit a candle and made a small dinner. One bowl, one napkin, one folded note beside my plate, the original letter I'd written to Joey weeks ago. Still unopened, still unsent. I slid it into a drawer and replaced it with a fresh sheet of paper. This time, the letter wasn't to him. It was to Lila. My dearest girl, I began. Someday, you'll be old enough to inherit more than stories. You'll inherit choices. And I want you to know that this house, these walls, this garden, this tiny kitchen with a slanted tile, belongs to you not because you are my blood, but because you saw me when others didn't. You honored me not with grand gestures, but with presence, with kindness, with showing up. That matters. It always has, and it always will. With love, Grandma. I folded the note carefully and placed it inside the envelope Mr. Edwards had provided, legal. Stamped, notarized. And I placed that envelope inside the small fireproof box beneath my bed. Because this time, the future was protected. Not by hope. Not by assumption. But by intention. The phone didn't ring that night. No apology. No sudden revelation. No gesture from Joey. But that was okay. Because not every story ends with reconciliation. Some end with reclamation. And that, in its own quiet way, is just as powerful. A month later, Lila came over again, this time with a basket. Inside, fresh herbs, a few potatoes, and 2 carefully wrapped cuts of steak. I want to learn how to grill, she said, but the right way. I didn't ask where she got the idea. I didn't need to. We marinated the meat together, my way. Salt, pepper, garlic powder, a little olive oil. Simple, honest. Out back, the old charcoal grill creaked when I opened it. I hadn't used it since before Joey stopped coming around. Lila watched as I showed her how to test the heat, how to listen for the first sizzle. She held the tongs like a violin bow, awkward but focused. And when the meat hit the grill, she grinned. We ate at the patio table, just the 2 of us. The same yard where I'd once been humiliated now held only quiet joy. She took a bite, paused, and said, "This is better than Dad's." I laughed, not because it was petty, but because it was true. She didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. When she left that evening, I sat out on the porch and watched the sun go down behind the same fence line where everything had once felt like an ending. But this wasn't the end. This was a beginning. A quiet one. Built not on reconciliation, but on legacy. Not on being invited back, but on knowing I had never truly left. That barbecue, that steak, those things weren't just moments. They were mirrors. Showing me who had changed. Who had hardened. And who had finally woken up. They threw my food in the dirt and laughed. But I didn't crawl. I stood still. And I saw them clearly. And then, piece by piece, I rebuilt my dignity. Plated it with herbs and warmth. Served it on my own terms. You see, the deepest betrayal doesn't always come from strangers or enemies. Sometimes, it arrives at a family gathering. With paper plates and overcooked ribs. With fake smiles and missing chairs. With silence so loud it leaves bruises. But healing? It looks different. It's not a confrontation. It's not a grand declaration. It's a slow, steady choosing of yourself. Again. And again. And again. So if you've ever been made to feel small at your own table, if you've ever been handed the scraps, or asked to smile while being erased, let me tell you something. You are not a burden. You are not a footnote. You are not disposable. You are the root. The reason. The one who stayed long enough to remember what love is supposed to feel like. And when they ask why I changed the will, why I left everything to the one person who never had to ask for it, I'll smile and say, because she saw me when it mattered. And that's all the answer I'll ever need.